Hey, everybody, welcome back to the podcast. You're listening to the longest running superhero role playing game on Earth. I'm your host, the Game Master, and in this one, I'm going to try to get through all the games that we ran in 2021. And since I'm doing so many of them, I'm going to try to do just nutshell versions of things and kind of speed run this. But before we get into it, smash like, make sure you're subscribed, and leave us a comment. We've got an awesome community here, and that's thanks to you. So thank you so much for being here. So, with all that said, let's dive in. So, the big event of 2020 was us killing off the main character of our game world because it was during quarantine and we didn't know then what we know now. So, several players, including myself, were kind of trying to wrap up the game at the time. But then that era passed and we regretted what we had done. We ran a series of adventures based on the death of Superman and the subsequent reign of the Supermen that were part parody and part homage, where we introduced several new characters, including Necrosis, Hollow Bear, the Cub, and Black Bear. So the Cub seemed like a contender to take the place of the original John Redbridge, but for whatever reason, the players were sort of just lukewarm to him. So we started to explore other options, which I will get into here in a minute. But before that happened, we brought in a major villain at the end of 2020, in the beginning of 2021, named Nebraphonus, who was actually the son of Jason of Argonauts fame. We've mentioned in previous adventures that spelljammers exist in our game world and that they are basically fantasy airships that travel from planet to planet. We said the crew of the Argo were such travelers, and that they didn't visit the island of Lemnos, but rather it was a planet called Lemnos. And it was there that Jason conceived a son with Queen Hypsipyle. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong. I just got it from Googling it. Hypsipyle. I don't know. If you know the correct pronunciation, feel free to put it in the comments. But at any rate, so their son was Nebraphonus, who was a mutant with more or less the same powers as Rogue. And while we didn't come right out and say that he was an ancestor of Rogue, we did hint that it was very possible. Anyways, so we established that Nebraphonus returns to Earth every few centuries once a new crop of supers has sprung up. Then he steals their powers, and he calls this the harvest. So when 2021 began, there were a lot of superheroes and supervillains who suddenly didn't have their superpowers, an event we jokingly referred to as the big power outage. As mentioned in previous episodes, we'd been working up Arnim Zola to be a bigger threat than he normally is. We also said he's a World War II German scientist who'd mastered cloning, as well as the ability to transfer a mind from a person into a machine and vice versa. So Arnim Zola launches a satellite into Earth's orbit and it contains a copy of his mind. The satellite broadcasts a signal, and the idea here is that more or less the mind of Arnim Zola is now almost like a computer virus, and he is going to infect as many machines as possible with it. On Earth, the classic Silver Age Fortress of Solitude is more or less a museum now, and a tribute to the life of the original Superman of the 20th century. So the new Superman, Clark Kent III, and the new Supergirl, Kara II, are building a new Fortress of Solitude in space. Arnim Zola's signal reaches them, and one of the Superman robots here is possessed by the mind of Arnim Zola, and it fights Superman and Supergirl. But the heroes manage to destroy it, then fly to where the satellite is to try to figure out what's what. They take the satellite back to their new Fortress of Solitude. Superman and Supergirl open it up, only to learn that Arnim Zola put a booby trap in it in the form of an atomic bomb. So that literally blows up in their faces and they take some damage but are still alive. But their new Fortress of Solitude is totaled. And they find out that while they had left to check out the satellite, all of the other Superman robots had flown away, each one containing a copy of the mind of Arnim Zola and, of course, the powers of Superman. At this point, an original character of ours named Dr. Philadelphia shows up. He's been around in our game world since World War II, and he's an enemy of Arnim Zola. He got his powers from the Philadelphia experiment, and as such, he can travel through time, teleport, etc., which is another theme we'll see revisited later in this video. So Dr. Philadelphia teleports Superman and Supergirl from A to B. And when he teleports them, he teleports only them, leaving the radiation from the atomic bomb behind. So they are no longer glowing from being at ground zero of Arnim Zola's booby trap. Then a Superman robot attacks Montauk. And for those who don't know, the conspiracy theories about Montauk were part of what inspired Stranger Things. In fact, the Stranger Things TV show was originally going to be set there. So several times over the years, we have featured that location in our game. And one thing that we said was that they had a particle collider like the one at CERN. So the Superman robot goes there and starts laying waste to the opposition while also cannibalizing the machinery there for parts. So a lot of superheroes show up for the Battle of Montauk, including a green Martian named Doug Duggs, who we said looked like Sean Astin from Lord of the Rings and Goonies fame. There's also a girl here named Risk, who is the daughter of Dagda and Morgan. She and Doug are dating by the end of all this. Also here is an Aquaman-like hero named Starfish, who, like his namesake, can be ripped in half and he will grow into 2 new starfish. Also here is Copycat, who is shaped like Chitara from the 2011 Thundercats cartoon, but her color scheme is based on Lionel. There's also a character inspired by Rorschach and The Question, and his name is Cicada. He's been in our game since 2016, the last time the actual cicadas came out where I live. Another hero is Accelerator, who is a African American speedster. He got his powers from a particle collider. So being around the one here at Montauk actually triggers his traumatic flashbacks. So he begins to relive the death of his father, who was a scientist, and the day of his origin story, which is when he got his powers. So Accelerator for us was, we were sort of taking aspects of the origin story of Cyborg from the Teen Titans. We were kind of blending that in with the Barry Allen Flash. Next is the Cub, who we mentioned in our recent Reign of the Supermen based adventure. And that was a nickname, by the way, that he hated. And it was not the name that he chose for himself. Eventually, the name that he starts kicking around using for himself is kind of a pun. And that name is Trace Cryer, since he's a clone, right? The next hero is Megan, Magen, and he is from the Middle East. He's a Captain America analog who fought the Germans in World War II. And since Arnim Zola is a German from World War II, then Magog is another. I said Magog, I'm sorry. Magen is another old enemy of his. The next hero is Micron, who's an analog of Atom. Micron shrinks down and rides a photon into the eye of the Superman robot in an effort to attack his robotic brain. Then there's Catalyst 2, who is a radioactive hero akin to Captain Atom. He stays a safe distance away at first for fear that Zola will split him like Magog did to Captain Atom in the Kingdom Come miniseries. Next up is Green Lantern, and this is the hero formerly known as Superman, before Dr. Manhattan exposed him to gold kryptonite. And specifically, this Superman used to be the Superboy of the 80s, and then these days he's a member of the Green Lantern Corps, training the next generation of heroes as best as he can. Last time we saw him, he wasn't sure what he wanted to do with his life now that he wasn't Superman anymore. So this is the first time we actually see him doing something. And his son, who was also named Christopher, by the way, is now going by the moniker of Powerhouse 2 and is wearing a techno symbiote created by Necron's counterpart from the antimatter universe, who was a heroic being that we called Bion. So Powerhouse 2 is also wearing his dad's old red and blue Powerhouse costume from the 90s. Next up is Luchador, who is a wrestler from Mexico, and we based his stats on Lobo. And he wears a mask that resembles the flag of Mexico, and he was a fan favorite, by the way. People loved the Luchador character. Then there is Faye, who is a little fairy we created as an analog to Marvel's Wasp, but unlike the Wasp, she has elder form from Changeling the Dreaming. So she's going to start trying to copy the abilities of the other supers. And this was a massive battle with a huge number of players. And in the end, they defeated the Superman robot, which was hard because he'd used parts from the Montauk facility here to build himself a 40 AP force field to help defend against their attacks. We used the stats of that force field, by the way, from Brainiac. And I did that so that the fight wouldn't be over right away and be anticlimactic. During the fight, though, Catalyst 2 was hurt, and at the end of the fight, he was leaking radiation. So the heroes rush him to an emergency room in New York City. And on the way there, they pass a school where the kids are doing an experiment involving oobleck, which I had never heard of before this. But my kids loved it and had played with it at school. For those who don't know, oobleck is a non-Newtonian fluid that behaves like both a solid and a liquid, depending on how much pressure is applied to it. It changes density and viscosity when force is applied. So when squeezed, it is denser and more viscous and temporarily acts like a solid. So when one of the students was walking on oobleck, the idea was if you would keep walking fast, the force of your footsteps lets you walk on its surface. But if you stop moving, it acts like a liquid and you sink into it. Anyways, so exposure to that radiation triggers the student's Latin X gene. And just as radiation plus spider venom gave Peter Parker spider powers, radiation plus oobleck gave this teenage boy oobleck powers. This was a character my son made during a blackout that we had at our house. And by the way, since we live in a log cabin in the forest in real life, when we have a blackout, it often takes a week or more before the electric company gets the power turned on again. So without the internet, my kids were suddenly very interested in role-playing games. so so Oobleck was my son's main character during that period. Likewise, my daughter played a teenage girl who was in the hospital when the other heroes brought Catalyst here. So again, his radiation has an effect on her, activating her X gene. But in my daughter's case, she likes gross out humor and wanted mucus powers. So the idea was since she was sick and congested, she would then develop thick, green, disgusting, slime like webbing as well as a thick green translucent body of slime. She started calling herself Snot Girl. And that was her main character during the blackout, which actually lasted weeks that time. Anyway, so Snot Girl and Oobleck meet soon after and go on a series of adventures together where they fight crime. And this is the first hint that we have that something's up in the game world and that ordinary citizens seem to be committing more crimes. What was going on was I made a supervillain in GURPS Supers. And like I've said before, when we play GURPS, we use a lot of house rules. So I know a bunch of people hate GURPS, but trust me, our version is pretty fun. Anyways, so I made a villain with the resurrection advantage, which means that if you kill him, he gets better. But then I gave that ability an enhancement called affects others, which meant his superpower is now that he can also bring back other dead characters. And not like a zombie or anything like that. It was more like he could summon the soul of the dead person, and then they'd have a living, breathing, solid body again. So even things like cremation didn't get in the way of him doing what he did. So he starts bringing back the dead and realizes that people would do anything to have their loved ones back. So he starts charging money. And the more he does this and is developing a reputation, the more money he charges. So as word gets out, we see people who would never dream of committing a crime suddenly robbing places out of desperation. So Snot Girl and Oobleck are encountering these people. And by the way, Snot Girl and Oobleck were made using our version of GURPS, and we gave them third edition GURPS style powers like Body of Snot and Oobleck Jet. And if you understand how Oobleck acts like a solid when it comes into contact, while it's moving, that means that Oobleck Jet does significant damage. We jokingly referred to it as my son's brick ray. So that was one reason I was using opponents that the heroes would empathize with, is so they wouldn't be mindless, kill happy murder hobos. So now, when Oobleck attacks someone, it's literally like him asking himself if he has the heart to throw a brick at some old man who just misses his wife and wants her back. It also forces the heroes to think about what the resurrectionist was doing and the moral implications of all of this. More heroes get involved, like Airhead, played by Kayla Hale. She had air-related abilities like body of air, flight, wind jet, etc. And also, Kayla, who herself has blonde hair, decided to make Airhead be the typical blonde stereotype. Kayla, for instance, tends to laugh a lot out of games, so therefore Airhead in game was always laughing and giggling and was sort of a party girl who just wanted to have a good time. Then there was Mandela, who is a female character similar to the Scarlet Witch in a way, and that she has probability control. She can try to alter reality to help the other heroes, but when she fails her role, she can create annoying nuisance effects like changing a person's hair color, etc. Mandela was added to the team roster for a variety of reasons, one of which was to explain away any continuity mistakes I may inadvertently make, since my real life brain tumor sometimes makes me forgetful and I make mistakes as a GM. And then last but not least, there is Nochtkind, who has darkness powers, dimension travel, warp, etc. They found her in a Hydra lab, but she has no idea who she really is or where she came from. She has long black hair and pale white skin, as well as otherworldly purple eyes. She can make any part of her body turn jet black, creating a costume effect, or making her eyes go totally black, sort of like her version of superheroes putting on glasses so they won't be recognized in their alter ego. She knows who Arnim Zola is because he was experimenting on her. She also, like Zola, has a thick German accent herself. Speaking of Arnim Zola, his mind virus is still affecting various machines around the world. The aforementioned Green Lantern has been locating robots with Zola's mind and then throwing them into the sun. One such being to become possessed by Arnim Zola is a hero my son played named Mr. Roboto, after the famous song from the 80s. He was a full conversion cyborg. That meant he had a human brain, but the rest of him was robotic. So Arnim Zola body jacks him and is more or less holding the brain hostage. The heroes fight Mr. Roboto, which is hard because he has a superpower that we call Body Slide. We made that power in GURPS, and it was a mixture of other superpowers all blended together into one. The effect is that Roboto has become insubstantial, and when he does so, he glows red, then cycles through all the other colors there are, and while doing this, he slides sideways and phases through any solid objects that would be in his way. So when the heroes encounter him at a shopping mall, he slides sideways through the parking lot, through solid light poles, etc., without damaging them or himself. The fight with Roboto actually lasted for 3 game sessions before the heroes finally managed to remove his head which had independent life support abilities to keep the brain alive. And after the head was removed and they had the brain of Mr. Roboto back, Zola caused the headless robotic body to body slide sideways into a hill going underground. So Nochtkind chased him and discovered weird veins all throughout the sewer system. And they followed these veins to the local prison. And the veins, by the way, were inspired by Stranger Things. When the heroes arrive at the prison, they see people protesting. Like I said, the crime rate is really high right now. And this is a private prison kind of doing its own thing and greasing the right palms so they can keep doing as they please. And as such, they have been executing way more people than normal. They claim this is partially due to overcrowding, but in reality, we learn that the prison was founded by a weird cult. And these executions are actually Lovecraftian sacrifice rituals and the cause of the veins under the city. One villain in particular is named Shard, and he has the resurrection advantage. So the prison officials keep sacrificing him over and over again, releasing what the Rifts role playing game would refer to as PPE, or potential psychic energy. Several characters are outside the prison protesting all this, including a former villain who was a teenager in the 90s. He was an enemy of the Continuum until the original Powerhouse talked him into reforming. His name is Proton, and in a way, we based the older adult version of Proton on Johnny Lawrence from the Cobra Kai TV series. Proton was another argument against the idea of heroes killing villains, because when you do, you take away any chance that character would ever have to turn their life around. Anyways, so the heroes are all here at the prison, which is close to the airport, and this is actually a military airport surrounded by various factories and warehouses. And one such building has its alarms go off. So the heroes all go to investigate, and they encounter a supervillain known as Heat Death, as in the heat death of the universe. He's another original villain who'd recently lost his powers thanks to Nebraphonus. So now he's wearing a suit of crappy power armor that he made in his garage that looks a bit like the Mark I Iron Man armor from the first Iron Man movie. And just like that one, it has flamethrowers built in because he's trying to replace his missing fire powers. Like so many other characters right now, he wants to steal something valuable to sell for a lot of money to pay the resurrectionist. And we learn that the powers of the resurrectionist are more far reaching than first thought. As the heroes are leveling up, so is the villain. And now he can also bring back quote unquote dead powers. So Heat Death wants his fire powers back. And it turns out that what looked like a mundane Quonset hut on the outside was just a front. Inside of this huge building is a deep cube-shaped pit that is massive. And this facility is about 2 hours north of where the Roswell UFO was taken in 1947. So while Hangar 18 at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base is the primary location for the secret reverse engineering of alien spacecraft for the United States military, the Mansfield Airport serves as a secondary facility, and here is where they have a colossal Huck starship in that giant cube-shaped pit. The Huck race, by the way, are about the size of the Incredible Hulk. They have 6 arms and many eyes and are actually related to spiders. Point being, Heat Death attacks the facility and tries to steal the ship's space-time drive. The idea here is that this small device, which is roughly the size of a microwave oven, is what allows this ship to travel the galaxy without it taking 100 years to get from A to B. The first hero to arrive on the scene here is named Blacksmith, and he attacks Heat Death with lightning while he's holding the time-space drive. The other heroes show up and do likewise, and Oobleck gets a critical failure hitting the time-space drive with his brick ray, so the thing malfunctions, and what comes next we ripped off from an old science fiction movie from 1985 called My Science Project, which is a guilty pleasure of mine. Just like in the movie, the time space drive goes off, summoning various things and people here from other points in the time space continuum. It summons some of these Huck aliens, and they are tough enough that they kill pretty much everything else that got summoned, including velociraptors from the past, cyberpunks from the future, etc. The heroes dogpile the aliens until they're knocked out. A villain is also summoned here named Time Wave, and he gets away. A hero is summoned here, and her name is Annalay Johnson, and she's from an alternate dimension where Torch of the Continuum dated Omni Girl, aka Karen Johnson, also of the Continuum. And that Torch got that Omni Girl pregnant. So Annalay is the daughter. And as such, she has superhuman intelligence like her dad had. So she manages to turn off the time space drive and it stops summoning people and things to this place. Another being that was summoned here is the Celtic Guardian, who can be difficult to explain. In DC Comics, the Legion of Superheroes fights a villain named the Time Trapper, and he has a lot of weird powers, including time travel, time control, etc. In one such comic book, they say that every person's life is like a metaphorical book, where each page is in this symbolic book would represent a moment in the life of that individual. So the first page would be the moment you were born. The last page would be the moment you die. There would be a page for your first kiss. There would be a page for the worst day of your life, so on and so forth. Well, so the Time Trapper has the ability to rip out a page from your book. When he does, all the other pages are still there. So that person is fine. They don't even notice that this single moment is missing. And then he takes that one page and he can breathe life into it. And it is not a clone. It really is that person exactly as they were at that age. In DC Comics, the Time Trapper did this to everybody that was in the Legion of Superheroes, creating a team that they would refer to as SW6. And in our game, that included Superboy Red and Superboy Blue. Superboy Blue was a teenage Clark Kent, the young version of the original Golden Age Superman. Superboy Red, though, was the younger version of the Eldar warrior who would one day end up on Earth and be known by a variety of different names, like King Arthur, Beowulf, and Oberon, all of which would mean bear. And of course, to the Irish, he was called Dagda. And so, to differentiate him from his normal counterpart who ages, etc., this version adopted the name of the Celtic Guardian. And he's been in many games over the years, and he's also a fan favorite. So he's been summoned from the 30th century, from the SW6 team, here to the 21st century, where he meets the Cub from the reign of the Supermen. And the Cub was the clone of the Celtic Guardian's older self, but he didn't grow to adulthood, just like Superboy from the reign of the Supermen comics didn't grow to adulthood. So Celtic Guardian and the Cub look like the exact same guy at the exact same age, which kind of weirds them both out. And Nochtkin thinks they're both pretty hot. But before anybody can say anything, the military wants to take the heroes into custody. Just then, Nochtkin opens a warp portal to the dark dimension, so the heroes run through the portal, escaping from the building. And the dark dimension is like a mirror reflection of the real world, as if everything in the world were spray painted with glossy black paint. It seems to be night here. There are no stars and no moon, and whatever the light source is coming down from this strange sky seems to act like a black light, giving an eerie form of illumination to this strange world. When the heroes enter the dark dimension, they are in a counterpart to the facility they were just in, except there are no people, and of course, everything is glossy black. Likewise, out in the parking lot, there are glossy black Hummers, but the windshield and the headlights are opaque and black, not allowing light to pass through, which begs the question of why they even exist. In the flower beds here, there are weird counterparts to shrubs, but it's as if you tried to make a shrub out of something like black coral. Also, while in the dark dimension, the heroes can't hear any birds. There are no signs of life, seemingly no bees, which raises questions about things like plant life without bees and breathable air without plants. So Ublek starts to ask Nochtkind questions about the dark dimension. He wants to know why the vehicles here have windshields that can't be seen through. She says she's never seen any people in this world, no life forms at all, so she doesn't think anybody actually drives the vehicles. Ublek asks why the vehicles exist then, and Nochtkin says she thinks of the dark dimension as kind of like a reflection of the real world. She comments that if a school bus takes kids to school and then she comes here, the black school bus will now be parked at the school, but there will be no kids in that glossy black school building. The heroes thought that sounded really creepy. The cub asks if time passes at the same rate here as it does there, and Nochtkind says that it does. So he says they should return to the real world as soon as possible because the time space drive is summoning things like dinosaurs, which are probably running around town trying to eat people as they speak. So the heroes walk towards the highway, and once they are a safe distance away from the military building, they open a portal to the real world and step out. Here on the highway is a strange vehicle. It is mostly blue with yellow trim and is about the size of a Winnebago, but it's sleek and futuristic. It's being attacked by a T Rex, and there are cyberpunks shooting at the T Rex with beam weapons. Celtic Guardian and the Cub head onto the highway where they engage the cyberpunks in combat. It was the cyberpunks who shot the T Rex, and when it fell, it landed in the weeds. Nochtkin sidesteps into the dark dimension to flank the cyberpunks, and where the T Rex had landed in the weeds in the dark dimension, that section of the field has an imprint where the T Rex should be, but there's no animal there. Instead, these weird coral like weeds are laying down, crushed by what would seem to be nothing. That weirds Nochtkin out. Meanwhile, Oobleck uses matter surfing to go over to where the cyberpunks are, who are in the middle of this weird carjacking scene. The driver of the futuristic Winnebago has a big hole through his chest where the cyberpunk shot him. Oobleck shoots a cyberpunk, taking him out. Snot Girl enters the futuristic vehicle, which she refers to as an alien school bus. She immediately notices that it is way bigger on the inside than the outside. At the front are two pilot seats side by side. In front of them, where the windshield should be, there are flat screen monitors displaying the outside of the vehicle. The buttons in the vehicle have comprehend language, so when Snot Girl would think that they are labeled with in English, somebody like Nochtkind would think that they were labeled in German. Speaking of Nochtkind, he exits the dark dimension and steps into the real world again. She sees Time Wave standing on top of the barrier between lanes of the highway. Nochtkin rolls a critical success and makes the darkness envelop the villain. Since she rolls a critical success, Time Wave doesn't get to dodge. So Time Wave travels to a different year, and Anna Leigh Johnson chases him through time. This also gets the attention of Dr. Philadelphia, who we mentioned earlier. So he teams up with Anna Leigh Johnson. And since the cyberpunks are in front of the vehicle, Snot Girl runs them over with the quote unquote alien school bus. Everybody gets into the bus except for Nochtkin, who enters the dark dimension again. And when she's there, she encounters her brother, and she didn't even know she had a brother. And like her, he has white skin, long black hair, and purple eyes. And he's wearing something that looks like a cross between a cape and a trench coat. Meanwhile, the dinosaurs summoned to the modern day are, for the most part, eating everything else that was brought to the modern day. So Mandela is trying to use her probability control powers to deal with the dinosaurs. Also, trying to deal with the dinosaurs are the Sentinels. After throwing yet another one of these Arnim Zola robots into the sun, the Green Lantern, formerly known as the Superboy of the 80s, returns to Earth and goes to the mall where a Sentinel is fighting a dinosaur. The Sentinel defeats the dinosaur, then sees the Green Lantern and recognizes his face from back in the day, so the Sentinel attacks him, just like in the good old days. And the Green Lantern fights him and wins. Nochtkin then catches up to the guy who looks like her, And while she was captured by Hydra and taken to a lab where they messed with her mind, he was not. And as such, he knows exactly who and what they are. They are the children of Dark Lord, the supervillain with so many APs of the Force manipulation power that he created entire worlds out of darkness and an entire alien empire of dark soldiers and dark ships and dark starfighters, etc. They had attacked Earth, and basically nobody was able to deal with them back when that happened. Until finally, the hero known as Soldine used his light powers to kill the Dark Lord, which caused the planet they were on and its breathable atmosphere to suddenly vanish, which killed Soldine. So Nochtkind is horrified to learn she's basically the princess of darkness, an heir to this awful legacy. And her brother hates the heroes for being on the side that led to his father's death. So the Dark Prince wants to become the next Dark Lord. He wants to kill the heroes and rule the universe. So Nochtkind brings him out of the dark dimension, which we find out was her creating it subconsciously, just as her father had created his empire of darkness. And she alerts the other heroes, and they all fight her brother, who knows more than she does and is such is more powerful and skilled than she is. So 2021 ends with all the heroes working together to dogpile the new Dark Lord, and they win. He is defeated before he can become the level of threat that his father was. But in the end, when the heroes think that he disintegrates due to exposure to the heroes' various light-based attacks, like the Green Lantern's glowing green energy blasts, the heat vision of Superman and Supergirl, etc., what actually happened is he created a dark dimension of his own, which is at this point in time just a two-dimensional black glossy floor and a weird starless, moonless sky with that black light effect that I described earlier. And he rests here and slowly gets some hit points back so that one day he can return. After the fight is over, Dr. Philadelphia and Anna Johnson are here, and some of the other heroes ask them if they can do what the Time Trapper did when he created the Celtic Guardian. Could they go back in time and take a page out of the book of the life of John Redbridge from the day before he died? But the Cub, who, as we said before, has all of Redbridge's memories and regrets, so on and so forth, says that Redbridge fought Kane in the 90s, and it was sort of a prophecy that he had to die for that. And if they grabbed a Redbridge from after the 90s, then that one would have to die too. So then they talk about using the Elder Spirit Stone, the Eldar Spirit Stone, that gave the Cub his memories. And maybe they could use it on the Celtic Guardian, since the Celtic Guardian really is a young John Redbridge. But the Celtic Guardian says that, first of all, he does not consent to that. He has tried very hard to become his own man. And second, he can't change. Even if you kill the Celtic Guardian, he respawns because he is always the way he was in that moment that he was originally taken from. So he can never learn new skills, he can never get old, etc. So even if they did use the Eldar Spirit Stone on him, it would just wear off. So finally, Aramis, of all people, asks whatever happened to Mr. Splits and Ms. Splits. They were a part of a weird race that has this strange ability to cause one character to turn into two characters. Some members of that race cause the character in question to split into a lawful good hero and an identical chaotic evil villain, while others cause the two new characters who were created to just have the same alignment they always did. So Dr. Philadelphia, Anna Johnson, and Green Lantern go back in time to the day that John Redbridge first came to Earth. They take the Celtic Guardian with them back to ancient Ireland, and he explains to a young Redbridge why they are there. Green Lantern has Ms. Splits in a glowing green bubble, so he doesn't touch her. Then he has the bubble envelop young Redbridge So when she does touch him, Redbridge splits into two identical versions of himself. The Redbridges say their goodbyes to each other, and the new copy is taken back to the future to the day he dies. He helps the heroes use Ms. Splits on Mara, creating a copy of her as well. And last but not least, the heroes create a copy of Counter Earth, which had been destroyed. And they put the new Redbridge and the new Mara there on Counter Earth. And that was the end of 2021. So this seems like a pretty good stopping point. As soon as we had killed off John Redbridge, our players were immediately unhappy. He had been such a big part of the game that the game didn't even feel like the game without him in it. And we immediately tried to think of what we could do moving forward to kind of course correct, coming up with various characters like the Cub and Victory Convoy as possible replacements. But the players didn't really take to any of them. We thought about getting the Resurrectionist to bring Redbridge back, but that didn't feel right either. The original Redbridge, we said, was in heaven and was finally at peace. So it wasn't until the very end that we found something we liked. Hopefully, you liked it too. If so, as always, we would love it if you'd be willing to take a quick second out of your time to smash that like button, make sure you're subscribed, and leave us a comment. And from what everybody here at the longest running superhero role playing game on earth, we hope you have a good one, and we'll see you in the next adventure. Bye.